Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to David's Den. I'm David, and I make videos about Stephen King, his novels, his short stories, and any adaptations that were made for film or television. Today, we're continuing with the movie vlogs, but I'm calling this a movie-ish vlog for the Night Shift collection. And the short story Strawberry Spring was made into the very first ever podcast adaptation of a Stephen King work. So I'm going to go ahead and say spoilers for all things Strawberry Spring, the podcast up through the end of episode 6, and spoilers for all things Strawberry Spring short story to the end, because we will be talking about how the story and the podcast line up as an adaptation. If you aren't caught up and you want to get caught up, you can check out all of my vlogs for the previous episodes. This video will still be here waiting. That is a cat playing with a toy. You were asleep when I started recording. Here we go. Episode 6 is titled Adrift at Sea, and I think I would just go ahead and retitle it A Prequel Where Kevin is Born. Subtitled Maybe? Question mark? We open right on the car accident. It's the exact same thing that we've heard before. We know where we are. We get the paramedics saying, hey, this one's still alive. And then suddenly there's a hospital montage that's actually very effective in the way it's used. Then one day, he's been there, he thinks a couple of days. The doctor comes in, Dr. Howard, I think it was. What's my note? It really doesn't matter. I made a note of it thinking that the doctor might come back, but he hasn't. But yeah, it's Dr. Howard, according to my notes. He's saying, how are you doing? Some of the headaches are starting to go away, doing all the concussion tests with the light. This was me doing the light, move your eyeballs kind of test thing. But this is kind of a different day because nobody has told him that his mother and brother died in the car accident. So Dr. Howard tells him. Suddenly, there's a smash cut. Kevin's voice is on the radio. There's the crackle of like an old transistor style radio, and Kevin's like broadcasting, hi, this is Kevin in Hardigan. I'm 14 years old and I live at New Sharon Home for Boys. And it's immediately cut into with Henry's voiceover. I went to go live at New Sharon Home for Boys. So is this our clue? Is this our definite, this was the split? When his parents died, that's the trauma that caused this dissociative personality. Can we view this as confirmation that Kevin is only inside of his head? There's still the problem about Anne having seen him talking to somebody. What was that, episode 3, I think, or 4? One of the two. So Anne saw someone physical. So that makes this, that gives us a lot of doubt, is what I'm trying to say, that Kevin is only in his head. But here it seems like we're getting that proof. Right? Without explicitly stating it, this seems to be proof, the birth of Kevin Hardigan from the trauma of Henry's, from Henry suffering the trauma of losing his parents is what I'm trying to say, if I could get the words in the right order. There we go. Henry's voiceover continues, I never really made friends. Kevin was another boy that was orphaned at the same time as me. So that's kind of a clue, I think, as well. He was the closest thing to a friend I made, he says. But then you see we get Kevin coming out of the headmaster's office at this home for boys saying, hey, Henry, he's ready to see you. So is he real? Was he really another boy at New Sharon Home for Boys? Or is this Henry's psychosis, right? Is he imagining Kevin's voice and a face or whatever for him on another boy that's there? Without the visuals, it's very intriguing. It keeps us guessing, like, what exactly is going on when we thought we had it figured out. Henry goes into the headmaster's office, and it's, kind of a standard speech of, somebody's coming to look for a new kid tomorrow. They're going to be looking for someone to adopt. We want everyone to be on the best behavior. And in this, the headmaster, trying to, keep Henry's hopes up, tells him this really terrible story that does the exact opposite. William Bell, right? William Bell? Yes. William Bell didn't get adopted until his 17th birthday. So chin up. It can happen even if you're not a young child. And guess what? He moved in with a great couple and went to Maine. And then later on in the story, he says Syracuse. And I thought you said it was Maine. Yeah, I did. Haha, I must have been mixing it up with some other boy. I love that the voiceover calls him out. He goes, I feel that William Bell was just a name that got thrown around by people who worked at these institutions as a, pep talk. It didn't change the fact that Henry knew, and we're getting the strong emotional sense. I think it's a great performance by Garrett Hedlund, that Henry is completely lost. and he knows there really isn't a hope of having a family again, and the one he had is gone. That really comes through in the performance and the writing, I think. Well, the writing, I think, hammers it home a little bit, but that, I think it goes hand in hand with the film noir style. So I don't mind it so much. I actually think it's embellished well with the performance. And we do see that there is a little hope there, because Henry's back with the boys, and he's like, hey, can you help me tie my tie? And do you think any of us has a shot? And of course, Kevin's the one that answers, and the question is still there. Is this Kevin imposed on somebody else that is there? Because Kevin ties his tie and teaches him how to tie his tie. So if Henry didn't know already, how would Kevin have that knowledge? It's very Fight Club.
Why do people think that I'm you?
So we're on the bench outside of the headmaster's office, waiting to go in, and Henry is likening it to, being on death row, the dead man walking, and he walks in to the office. It's finally his turn. He's been waiting and waiting and waiting, and no one's making a sound, and he's counting the tiles to help calm his nerves. This is Mr. and Mrs. Curran. Hi, Henry. How are you? He smells Brill cream on the man in his hair and immediately dislikes him, but has this great affinity and fondness for Mrs. Curran. He has this whole thought process of, this is just a woman who can't have a child, and she's so hopeful of finding that right child, but I'm not it. She wants a little child that she can raise, maybe a daughter, someone that, and this goes back to some of the voiceover from earlier, someone that she could mold, right? The idea of being a parent and shaping someone's personality. By the time you're 15, we already have a personality. We're set. It's actually a really fantastic insight into the minds of why people prefer to adopt younger children, and how it might not necessarily be the appropriate thing for the child, if that's who you're thinking of. It's a very complicated issue, and I just got off on a tangent about the morality of adoption and age, and that's not what I intended to do at all. He has his meeting with the Currans. It's nice, and then he's like, I need to be alone. There's too many boys around. He goes for a walk. And as soon as he said he went for a walk to be alone, I thought, oh my God, is this the birth of his walks? Right, that he does to ease his mind when he has his migraines in 1968. And we know that he went driving, according to the story, because he had the same problem in 1976. But right after I thought that, he has this great voiceover. The only thing you have in this world is what you can see, touch, taste, and feel. Walking around was the only thing that felt real to me. And suddenly I realized that taking these walks helps me to feel better. And it still does. So there was like this immediate validation of, yeah, David, you were meant to take it as the birth of his walk. Good job. I always love when stories do that, when you are just one step ahead of it, to feel like, wait, I get it, am I right? Boom, here comes that validation. Unless it's something that's so obvious that by validating us, it's like, duh, I got that, why waste your time? Here, I think it's being done very well. Henry, while he's out walking, suddenly sees, catches a glimpse of a shadowy figure behind a tree. Hello? Who is that? Do I know you? Henry starts chasing this figure as it runs away, saying, it's more of a figure of a shadow than it is of a man. And at one point, the head turned and looked back at Henry, and he's like, oh, shit, I think it's Dad? What? Dad's dead. Dad died in Korea. Remember, that's why they were going to their grandmother's house to live when they got into the car accident. Which then begs the question, why didn't he just go live with his grandmother instead of being put in an orphanage? I didn't think about that before I started recording this. It's a shitty grandmother. He's chasing this figure, and he finally catches up to it. He realizes it's only a shadow. Great line. It was March. The spring colors were bright. I felt faint. Boom. He passes out. Suddenly the police are there. They're finding this body. Hey, I found another one, and it's a guy this time. The guy this time. Unlike other episodes where there's always been some sort of direct dialogue or a sound effect, a swooshing kind of sound effect that takes us into a different time period, or the voiceover, there's always some sort of clear change, a signal to us that we're moving. And this was so seamless that we're thinking that Henry's body is being found having fainted back in this childhood past. It turns out it's Henry in 1968. He fainted in the quad. 2 police that are patrolling are like, dude, you're out after curfew. What are you doing? We thought you were dead. We thought you were another victim of Spring-Heeled Jack. Whew. Okay. So what we're seeing here is the format of the story itself and how it's being told is starting to mirror Henry's psychosis, these smooth ins and outs. Or actually, let me backtrack. I'm getting ahead of myself because we're going to see going ahead in this episode, and little spoiler for episode 7, a little bit into the next one, Henry's state of mind is a little more fluid. We get a little more voiceover than action happening than we have in previous episodes, explaining how his mind's working. Lines are a little blurred. So this transition is a slow way of preparing us for that. And I just want to point that out. So as we move forward in this episode into the next, pay attention to that. It's actually a really cool thing that they're doing in technique to tell this story for us. So the cops check his ID. He's like, I'm okay. You can check me out with Captain Spencer. We ever see you out again, we're gonna arrest you. Don't be out after curfew. Now this made me wonder, remember was it, I think 2 episodes ago, that Kevin broke in on the radio? The cops are everywhere. Be careful when you go out. So I started thinking that this was actually a few days earlier than we were left in the last episode for the timeline in 1968. Maybe this is the night that he was going to Rachel's in the snow and lost track of time and those hours. So, okay, this is where my mind is. Great. We're getting a little backstory even on the stuff that we already know, as well as full backstory of the psychosis and how Kevin was born. No, he gets to Rachel's and the conversation just basically indicates that we picked up on the same day where the timeline had left off for us. And while that's fine, I was a little disappointed because I thought we were going to get a little more information about Anne's death. But before that, of course, Kevin catches up to him as he's walking from the cops to Rachel's apartment. And that thing that we've been wondering about, why does he work every single shift, is addressed. So these things that were just kind of peppered in as intriguing, suspenseful, okay, I'll buy it things, now are being given pure validation. So I am here for the writing of this. I was a little off put on the first couple episodes with the dialogue. It was a little obvious, but now that I'm used to the style, I think that was just them finding their way. And by here, episode 6, the writing is solid. Henry says, are you finishing up the late shift at the radio station? Yeah, I thought you were the morning guy. Morning, noon, night. I'm here whenever you need to hear me. So good. And underneath it all, there's these footsteps that are getting louder. Oh my God, somebody's coming up. This is going to be our confirmation that he's either talking to himself. Somebody's going to say, who are you talking to?
Why do people think that I'm you?
Or that Kevin is a real person. But no, it was just the sound mixing. Again, for some reason, their footsteps were getting louder. We knew that they were walking. It's not like we transitioned from grass to sidewalk. We were always on the sidewalk. We always heard the footsteps. Well, they have a little conversation about a relationship, and Kevin's like, I envy you. I can't seem to make a long distance relationship work. Maybe that's because he keeps killing other girls he might be interested in. Just a thought, on our theory that Kevin is actually Spring-Heeled Jack, but Kevin is also actually Henry. It follows. Trust me.
I am Jack's wasted life.
Maybe one day you can help me figure out why. Until then, this is where I go left and where you go right. It's like they're giving us a literal splitting of the personalities. The 2 personalities in his head are deciding who's going to be in charge right now. We're watching it happen through a conversation that Henry doesn't even realize is only happening in his head. Great. And then I thought this one was a little overkill, but I think it was meant to be heavy-handed in the film noir style. Kevin says he has to crash. I'm also working the morning shift. Like I said, morning, noon, and night. If you're listening, I'm there for you. And there's this crackling leaf sound under their feet that's very reminiscent of the static on the radio from when he was a kid, or even sometimes as Henry is dialing or tuning, I guess, rather, the radio, that crackle as I'm Kevin, and I can't crackle with my voice, but you understand what I'm trying to do, I think. Kevin finishes it by going, keep you company on those foggy nights. And we know from the time period on the disappearance of Spring-Heeled Jack, or rather we can pretty much strongly infer that it's the fog that is triggering the murders for whatever reason, whether we're right or wrong. In our theory about Kevin, I mean. So then he gets to Rachel's. It's a conversation that we haven't heard before. She's like, let's just go to bed. Tomorrow is another day. And we get this voiceover, but it wouldn't be just another day for Anna Gray. Wait, did he mean Anne Bray, the editor at the paper? No, Anna Gray. We cut back to the cops patrolling, and one of them kind of stumbles and slips. Oh, look, it's a head, or at least part of one, because Anna Gray's head had been cut in half. Even her glasses had been sliced, and the two halves of her head were placed at either end of the quad, which is where Henry's body was found. So I'm hoping that in the next episode, he becomes a suspect. Two cops literally found him on the quad and then found a head that had been cut in half. Why would he not be a suspect? And if he does become a person of interest, I'm really interested to see how he gets cleared, because he wouldn't have any sort of alibi, right? And also, why Anna Gray? Where did that name come from? Marcia Curran was the last victim in the short story. You probably clocked it. The Currans came to adopt Henry. Marcia Curran was the name of the last victim in the story. And her death isn't described. This splitting of the head is completely created by the writers of Strawberry Spring, the podcast. And I love it. I love what they're doing because he keeps escalating with every single kill. But they've also paid homage to the original story in that the Currans, they've kept the name, right, of this last victim. Not sure how I feel about that. You're paying homage to the story, but why couldn't we have just come up with a new name for the new characters and left the last victim be Marcia Curran? And in the short story, that's the death that kind of ends it. The 68 timeline is over. The dean of students says, that's it. I call spring break early. Everyone go home. Henry packs up with luggage, like 6 people, into his car, says it wasn't a comfortable trip, and we drove home. Then suddenly we're back in 1976, and he's wondering why he's afraid to open his trunk, like we've talked about in previous episodes. So all of this is embellishment, and I really, really love how they're doing it. I just don't understand why we had to change the name again. It's the same thing with Ann Perkins and Ann Parkins. One letter. Why did you need to change it? But we have another amazingly smooth transition in time as we get Henry saying, another girl was dead. I sat next to Anne. Wait, what? Sat next to her where? They're on the bench outside of Chief Spencer's office, which means that we are now back in the 1976 timeline, and he equates sitting on the bench to the feeling of sitting on the bench outside the headmaster's office waiting to meet the Currans. So what an amazing tie back to the memory and this fluidity we have in our own minds, that time doesn't always matter. Is that a cat rustling in a box behind me? Oh my God, Bruni, stop. Dude, I swear to God he was asleep when I started this. Cat, you're crazy. But that voiceover kind of culminates in Henry going, I'm sitting here, I'm waiting. Just like I was waiting to meet the Currans, what if I don't want to be patient anymore? So we're seeing this angst in our character kind of grow. And in this conversation too, Bruni, lie down or don't. Please, I love you, please. Really, Anne and Henry are there because they found that head. If you remember from last episode, the victim, you're going to start again. The victim in 1976, they found her head in the same place that they found, oh my God, you are so fucking cute. Anne and Henry had found the head of the victim in 1976. They finally get into the office to talk to Chief Spencer. Chief Spencer's like, I have John Dancy in custody. You wouldn't recognize him. He was all strung out on dope. I have a theory that John Dancy and Carl Amalara, if you remember, we have John Dancy who found Gail Kerman's body, the first victim in 68, and we have Amalara who was her boyfriend that they suspected and then had to let go because Spring Hill Jack struck again while he was in jail. So now Chief Spencer has this theory that they've actually been working together. One can alibi the other, and Anne's like, holy shit. This would be unprecedented in history if they have gone on this killing spree for all these years. And Henry says, and I love that there's this tone of excitement in his voice that we're not sure is this is a story. I can write all of this again. Or if there's an excitement because he's starting to realize what's happening in his own head. There's this slow burn about it that's really satisfying because he says 2 different people One can lead a normal life while one kills, and vice versa. That's exactly what's happening, except we think it's only one person who thinks he's two. Chief Spencer's phone rings. Turns out that the mother of the victim, of the head that they found, the mother and father are there, and Chief Spencer's like, hey, you guys are in this. Wait right here, follow my lead. Holy shit, it was the Currans. The voiceover immediately, I recognized them. It couldn't be, not after all these years. I can still smell the Brill cream. So they actually did keep Marcia Curran as the last victim. It was just the most recent victim in present day, whose name we don't get in the short story. Oh, I actually really, really loved that. So they kind of threw me and then won me back in terms of adaptation technique. Bravo. But there's a lot of things that happen here technique-wise that I think are fantastic in terms of the writing and how the threads come together. You have Henry in the police station where in, I think it was 2 episodes ago, last episode, he clocked the smell of the police station and the sense memory, which goes back to the emotional memory recall discussion that he had with Rachel, and I think it was episode 2, that all clues us into the fog and Kevin, and he has this memory, sense memory of the Brill cream that Mr. Curran is still wearing. So we're tying moments from this entire series, from the previous 5 episodes and this episode, all together in this one scene. And he tells us, I was right, they wanted a baby. It turns out they got a little girl named Marcia. Now she was college aged. Now in the short story, we don't get, wait, I meant to pull it up and I didn't. Let me pull it up real quick. It was the last unspeakable night of Strawberry Spring when Marcia Curran was slaughtered on the mall. Why she had been out and alone is forever beyond knowing. She was a fat, sadly pretty thing who lived in an apartment in town with 3 other girls. She had slipped on campus as silently and as easily as Spring-Heeled Jack himself. What brought her? Perhaps her need was as deep and as ungovernable as her killer's, and just as far beyond understanding. Maybe a need for one desperate and passionate romance with the warm night, the warm fog, the smell of the sea, and the cold knife. Oh, I love that bit of writing. But that's all we get about Marcia Curran's death. Here, by placing it in present day and tying it to a past that are both, I was about to say underdeveloped, but they're not developed at all in the short story, it gives the creators of this podcast license to maneuver around and make things connect in such a beautiful way that isn't necessarily strictly adhering to the source material, but as I said in previous videos, paying homage and showing the love and honor that they have for the source material. My main thing in saying that there's not a big deal made of Marcia Curran's death or any reason why. There hasn't been a reason why for anyone's death so far. We don't know why Spring-Heeled Jack does it, and now suddenly we get one. About the Currans. They didn't remember me, but I remembered them. Emotional memory. It all comes rushing back. So this is what ties in the discussion with Rachel, like we talked about earlier from episode 2. And then he's talking about remembering them in the orphanage, and he says, I didn't feel rejection at the time, but that rejection washes over me now. Which suddenly gives us, if we're right, with the split personality of Kevin and Kevin being Spring-Heeled Jack.
Why do people think that I'm you?
This finally gives us a motivation for one of the killings. And whether you clock that in kind of those technical terms or not, the way it's done definitely leaves you with this feeling of, he is the killer. He had a reason to kill her last night. And we know that he was out last night killing someone. Or at least Spring-Heeled Jack had his car while doing it. But the episode ends with him wondering, do I tell them that I recognize them? That they rejected me? Or do I just say, I'm sorry? And that's where I'll leave you guys as well, because I'm about to immediately actually record episode 7, but I'm going to change my shirt so it looks like it's a different day. I shouldn't tell you that, but I just did. Go ahead and hit like, share, and subscribe before you go. That way you don't miss another video from my Stephen King publication order readathon. If you want to follow me over on social medias or support the channel via Patreon, all those links are down below. See you guys next time.